And now from Department of Finance.
Lizzie Perrin, Department of Finance. A lot of the benefit of this proposal has already been covered by Mr. Salzillo, but I'd like to emphasize just a couple of points. With the implementation of public safety realignment, thousands of inmates are serving their time at the local level instead of state prisons and are serving longer sentences at the local level. Many county jails are outdated or simply are not designed to house inmates for long-term sentencing, and so as a result, necessary treatment space is not available and program and mental health services are not able to be administered in those locations. Although the state has already invested in this issue, there are gaps that still remain statewide, and we've seen this in counties that have requested funding in previous measures but were not awarded such funding. So just to emphasize the point, this funding is limited to counties that have never received funding or only received partial funding in previous grant programs. As rehabilitation needs to continue with offenders who are incarcerated, the funding does focus on reentry, rehabilitative programming, and mental health services, and the treatment space necessary to provide such services. So although additional beds could result from the renovations and modifications, added capacity is not the focus of this proposed funding. So this is an investment we can make to provide the opportunity for ongoing services which benefits the rehabilitation of offenders. Thank you.
Thank you. LAO.
We are concerned that this proposal lacks an adequate assessment of need. For example, the administration has really not provided a detailed assessment of what rehabilitation programming space or what healthcare service space is really needed at the county level. We think that there are really a couple of key components that any assessment should include. The first is an assessment of how Proposition 47 has impacted the need for jail construction. After Proposition 47 passed, the statewide jail population did decline pretty significantly by about 10,000 inmates on a statewide basis. That may have mitigated the need for some of this additional construction, though it is difficult to determine without some sort of assessment of what that impact was. The other key component of any assessment of county need, in our view, should include an assessment of to what extent counties have really explored alternative options that would alleviate the need for state funding for jails. In particular, whether counties have really explored options that could reduce their jail populations, such as sentencing offenders to probation rather than jail terms, or maximizing the use of pretrial release programs to reduce the number of offenders that are held in jail awaiting trial. I think without that sort of an assessment, it's really hard for the legislature to assess what the level of county needs is. It's possible there may be some, in our view, but without that sort of an assessment, I think it's very difficult to determine whether the $250 million that's being proposed by the administration is justified, whether that's an appropriate amount or some other amount would be appropriate. So absent this sort of a detailed assessment, we are recommending that the legislature not approve the requested funding at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes. I don't know when's the last time you maybe have visited or been to one of the, especially at the county jails, the jails. I think we look back at the way the jails were constructed years ago and look how we're being faced with now at the county level regarding the programs to rehab these individuals so they don't come back to jails, not to mention the mental health aspect of it. The jails weren't designed to accommodate those type of inmates like we see now. And the fact that one thing we forget about the discussions is the safety of our officers, the men and women that provide the protection for the inmates. I don't think there's probably a day that goes by you go to any one of our county facilities, especially where officers are being assaulted by the inmates because of the way these facilities are being designed, or how they have been designed, right? And yeah, you're right. More inmates are coming from the state level to the county level, so it's a big burden on our county facilities. So I think this is just a beginning. I think they need more money than the 250, but at least it's a step in the right direction. And I would look that we move forward with this in whatever amounts we can give them, because it's greatly needed in our county levels, especially. Sometimes we overlook the bigger picture of what we expect to be done, and if we don't give them enough funding for it, and we look at put it other departments or other ways of trying to reduce the inmate population, we're not being counterproductive in a sense. So with that, I would probably see if you'd ever have a chance to go look at one of these facilities, and maybe ask one of the officers, what do they think? You know, do they think that the way our jails are currently constructed, are they the right way to provide rehabilitation services? Not to mention treating our inmates with mental health issues. And the last thing I talk about, safety for our officers that are out there. Do they really feel safe doing their job in here, on top of doing all the other things that they're required to do? So that's just my comments I wanted to add to it as well.
Okay. Ms. Campos, do you have anything? Or no? Mr. Lack? Okay, here's my dilemma. So about 3 years ago, I told the County of Los Angeles, when they wanted to expand their jail, that I wasn't going to give them a dime unless their new jail that they wanted to build took into account mental health professionals, psychiatrists, teachers, people to train people, get jobs. And it kept saying beds, 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 and I got angrier and angrier. The Sheriff's Association came in when there was another discussion about getting money for more jails, and I told I would never vote for it if it was just more beds and it wasn't about rehabilitation. The state, Corey came into my office, and no disrespect to Corey, but for the first time, I heard a discussion from the sheriffs in the county about a different type of facility, not the ones that Curb is talking about, but one that actually looks at rehabilitation in a comprehensive manner. And so in some ways, I'm conflicted where I told you this is what I want, and you're coming back and tell me that I'm going to give you what you want. However, the LAO does have a valid point about ensuring that we just don't give you the money and we look around 2 years later, we don't get what we want. We get kind of the same thing because of whatever. And so what I would like to do, obviously, is to hold it over, give BSCC and sheriffs to come back to the committee to show us that you are going to build what you say you're going to build, and give us that comfort level. And I will let you know that last year there were $40-something million given to I guess local chiefs of police and others to do as they wanted to. And this committee asked them, and also the committee in the Senate asked, what were you doing what were you going to do with the money? And we didn't get a sufficient answer. And as you know, that money was eventually cut out of the budget. It would have been in there if we had gotten a clear answer on what you were going to do with the money. And so I would strongly recommend, especially for the committee here, and even the ones that are big advocates of yours, if you're not building something that is different from what we normally do, and if you're building something more of what Curb is talking about, the chances of it getting through are not going to be very good. And so we're going to hold this over. Hopefully you can get back to us some assurances that these are not just regular prison beds, the same old, that we're doing something different. Mr. Rodriguez.
Just real quick to add, is there a jail out there that's been kind of designed differently that we can look and say, okay, these are the type of facilities we should be building? I don't know if anybody can answer that.
I would mention the women's facility in San Diego County, the Las Colinas facility in Santee. The way they describe it is that it looks more like a community college campus than a jail. There's a ton of programming there. Women are classified, of course, depending on their situation and risks and the kinds of programs that they can be in. It's like no jail I've ever seen before. I just visited there about 6 months ago.
And I might add to that, Assemblymember Stanislaus County, which is a good example nearby. They've benefited from prior rounds of this state funding. They've completed facilities. They are breaking ground on new facilities. And it provides a good juxtaposition of where we have been, the facilities you were referring to, the dangerous linear type jails that are not conducive to officer safety or inmate rehabilitation. You can go see the downtown Modesto jail, and I don't mean to criticize, I just provide that as an example. You can see where we've been and where we still are in some facilities, and then you can go about 6 miles down the road to Ceres to see their public safety center where they've completed their Unit 2. Unit 2, I believe, is 128 beds in 16-bed pod-type facilities. They have plumbing in each of the facilities, so if they have to be locked down, they're not without facilities. When you walk in the unit, it's bright, it's airy. I don't mean to fantasize about the realities of being in jail, but you can, within the period of about an hour, you can see the difference. You walk into Unit 2 and you see a classroom, and then a classroom, and then an office, and then a classroom, before you even see a cell. And it's just, it really is a change. You walk in, you see a control room, and it's a 270-degree facility. So the staff can see all around. They have their safety issues dealt with. It's safer for the inmates. So I think it provides a good example of the.
And I'm let you can have the last word. But in part two, these entities or these counties that have not done it, I also want to make sure they have a willingness to take on this new way of incarceration. I'm not certain they are 100% behind wanting to do this, or are they just going to take the money and build the same old, same old? So we need some information from them, their willingness to build what we hope will be the wave.
Before Ms. Buchan closes, I would just tell you that the board has excellent documents that shows the programs that have been applied for, and including the programs that have been successful in bidding for the funding. And we can certainly provide that to you, because you'll read it, I think, and you will say, this is not jails for new jail's sake. This is, it's replacement beds, community transitional, healthcare building. Some of these buildings have no beds at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sorry to have my back to you, too. I wanted to clarify the kinds of jails that I'm talking about actually include the old linear facilities. It includes the new pod facilities, the more modern designs. Those are all jails, and I think that we need to explore alternatives for reducing incarceration, not just reducing incarceration in old deteriorating facilities, but reducing incarceration, period. We have, as has been mentioned, we have a very high pretrial incarceration rate. We have a very high rate. We use jails as responses to homelessness, to a lot of issues that people should not be jailed for. And I think that before we start reinforcing our capacity, if not expanding our capacity, that we need to make sure that we're exploring those opportunities to reduce incarceration. It's widely acknowledged that our incarceration rate as a nation in California is about average for the nation, that our incarceration is way out of step with the rest of the world, and that is a blight on our country. We're rightfully ashamed of that incarceration rate, and we are not going to reduce that incarceration rate by building new facilities. And as for the programming and treatment, again, there is a large body of research that shows that programming and treatment are more effective when they're in the community instead of when they're in a jail. And with respect to the comment about how the old facilities were not built for mental health treatment, I agree with that, and I would push that further to say that again, the research shows that mental health treatment in a locked facility is not conducive to improving. People are separated from their social networks. They're separated from their families. If they have a counselor or have some supportive group that they're a part of, they are secluded and locked away from that group. It is an environment that is designed to punish, and as we've heard, whether new or old, it doesn't change the realities of the jail. And so I just wanted to clarify that point, that I think we really need to focus on reducing incarceration, period, and trying to and prioritizing programs for mental health treatment services, substance use treatment, job training, rehabilitation, everything. Prioritize those services in the community where they're a lot cheaper and a lot more effective. And I'm happy to provide those studies if that would be helpful.
And I agree with you wholly, completely, and I think Prop 47 addresses that, and there's some other things that we're doing as a legislature that we voted on, reducing mandatory minimums. We're doing that right now, and those individuals are the ones that you're talking about. But there are some individuals that need to be incarcerated, without a doubt. I don't think taking Charles Manson out and having him in a facility outside of jail will do anybody any good. So there are individuals that need to be incarcerated, and while they're incarcerated, hopefully we can help them, retrain them, get out of criminality and move it in. So that's kind of what we're kind of talking about them. And then the low-level, non ones that have drug problems, absolutely, we need to have places for them to go outside of the jail system where we can actually help them. So I think we can work on both levels. So hopefully we can come to some solutions that we can provide funding on both ends. So I want to thank everyone. We're going to hold this over until we get, public comment. Oh, God. Okay. Unfortunately, all you can do is your name and who you represent.
Sure. Darby Kernan with the California State Association of Counties. I associate my remarks with Corey Salzillo.
Thank you.
Julian DeVoris with the Urban Counties of California, also here in support of this item and agree with what the state sheriffs have said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicole Wertelman on behalf of the Ventura County Board of Supervisors in support.
Thank you.
Again, Rosa Kiel with the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color. Strongly disagree with our friends at the sheriffs and strongly support the words of my colleague Lizzie, and just really urge us to think about where else we could spend $250 million like the Strong California proposal that this chair has proposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Lindberg on behalf of the Friends Committee on Legislation of California, in support of reducing mass incarceration, in support of finding alternatives to incarceration, and urging the committee to reject the proposal. Thank you.
Emily Harris with the Ella Baker Center, in strong opposition to this jail construction money. I wanted to say there is no such thing as a green jail. There's no such thing as a mental health jail. And if you all want to go look at some facilities that need resources, go check out your homeless shelters. Go check out the low-income housing and other places in the state.
Katie Tertoka. I'm here with CURB, in support of CURB.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Greppy with Parent Voices California, as well as Equal Voices for America's Family. And I absolutely reject the funding and support CURB's views on how the funding should be spent.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Maureen Washburn with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice, in strong opposition to spending additional funds. Thanks.
Thank you.
Steve Meinrath on behalf of the ACLU of California, in strong opposition to another $250 million for jails.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Keith Caldwell, Napa County 5th District Supervisor. Strongly support additional funding from the state of California, specifically to address Napa's issue. Before the earthquake, we were awarded funding for a reentry facility, and now our need is for jail. I brought you a photograph today, too, of the jail filled with epoxy. Thank you.
All right.
Michael Brodheim, an intern with the American Friends Service Committee, in strong opposition to building more jails. California is now the largest incarcerator in the world. It's a very dubious distinction.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Robert Copeland. I support Curb's bill. We don't need more jails. We need more alternatives to jails.
Thank you, sir.
Again, Marvel is with Communities United for Restored Youth Justice in strong oppositions to more money for more jails.
Thank you, ma'am.
Pete Wywoody, California Partnership Health and Human Services Network, in strong support of Curb's proposal. The $250 million could immediately eliminate the maximum family grant and fund poor children having a successful future instead of building cages for their future.
Again, Sean Rundle with the California Peace Officers Association in support of the proposed funds.
Thank you. And with that, I want to thank everyone for your comments and your testimony. Thank you. Item number 4, BSCC on the $20 million city law enforcement grants. California Police Chiefs Association, Chauncey Smith, ACLU, Department of Finance, and the Ledge Analyst Office.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Shall I begin?
Please.
Thank you. Katie Howard, once again, with the Board of State and Community Corrections. Our role is ministerial and data collection with respect to the city law enforcement grants. As you'll recall, last year's budget allocated $20 million for frontline law enforcement agencies, and along with that, required the agencies that received that funding to report data on the number of use of force incidents that resulted in hospitalization or death. We've just posted the first quarter report of that data collection on our website.
Thank you. California Police Chiefs Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, David Bejarano, President of the California Police Chiefs Association, obviously in support of the allocation of $20 million for municipal police departments to increase positive outcomes between city police and in the homeless community. And we know that in many of these cases, individuals are suffering from mental illness, substance abuse, or a combination of both, and the other high-risk population involving our youth. I also want to recognize the leadership and commitment involving this legislative body as far as providing affordable housing and legislation increasing the availability of crisis shelters. It's clear to me that you're taking a leadership position. We have more than 113,000 homeless persons in California, basically the population of Inglewood. It's a major issue facing our communities. In San Diego County, including my city, we've seen anywhere from a 50% to 100% increase in responding to calls for service involving our homeless population. And again, we see a lot of that reflected throughout the state. About 30% of our homeless population have severe mental illness, leaving nearly 34,000 seriously ill individuals without health care or housing. Oftentimes, the best chance to divert these individuals into treatment services comes through the initial contact with law enforcement. And I'm sure all of you are aware that normally as the first responders, police officers in the front line are the first to make that contact and hopefully provide some resources for these individuals. And that's the reason why ensuring that the officer making the primary contact is equipped to provide necessary assistance in these cases is paramount to public safety in managing and hopefully providing the resources needed by these individuals. Programs eligible for this funding include cold deployment teams that are currently used by law enforcement agencies, very familiar with the HOT team in San Diego, Los Angeles, Contra Costa, Sacramento, and many other regions. HOT team pairs specially trained uniformed officers, a higher level of training in the area of mental illness, with a mental health clinician. They operate in full shifts and they respond to calls involving where their intervention skills training is necessary. For example, the San Diego Police Department's Psychiatric Emergency Response Team, PERT, which consists of an officer and a mental health clinician, provides emergency assessment and referral for individuals with mental illness. The Homeless Outreach Team in Anaheim consists of an officer and a social worker, proactively engaging homeless individuals to help assist them in assessing services. In a one-year window, Anaheim's HOT team recorded a 47% success rate in connecting homeless individuals with appropriate resources and services. successfully serving over 200 homeless individuals between 2013 and 2014. Shifting over to juvenile diversion, in my city, the Chula Vista Police Department's juvenile unit processes over 400 juvenile-related arrests per year. Through our juvenile diversion program, first-time minor offenders are referred to a community-based prevention and intervention program. Our department has partnered with a local nonprofit, one of the largest in San Diego County. In fact, they actually work out of our facility, and they focus on youth counseling and rehabilitation for the past 10 years. Participants typically need to complete 2 or 3 months of counseling, write a reflective essay, and complete 20 hours of community service. Youth who successfully complete diversion will have their cases closed within the police department, meaning they will not go to court and face further criminal action for their offense. As far as outcomes, our department enrolled 152 youth in our diversion program between July 2013 and June 2014, with a 97.4% of the youth successfully completing the program. The youth who remain arrest-free after the program was 143, or 94%. Obviously, diversion works, and these are examples of effective programs that a few law enforcement agencies with great resources have been able to implement in their communities. There are many, many more agencies around the state that lack the resources for these type of programs, and the funding proposed will ensure that more communities are better served by these types of programs. This is not a blank check for law enforcement. This budget item will ensure that our high-risk population in our state are connected with services they need to stop that revolving cycle of in and out and provide long-term solutions. And I respectfully ask for your support and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chauncey Smith from ACLU.
Thank you, Chairman, for having me here today. Once again, ACLU of California, Chauncey Smith. I'd like to provide a bit of context in regards to this specific item on the agenda here today. I'm sure the LAO will continue to fill that in a bit more, but this specific funding, currently at $20 million proposed by the governor, originates from a pot of money established in 2012, which was a 3-year deal for local city law enforcement to deal with economic issues that they were facing as a result of the recession. In subsequent years, that original amount of approximately $24 million was increased to 27, 27.5, and then 40. That deal was supposed to end last year. However, the legislature and governor agreed to a 1-year extension and also to switch the structure of it so it's not just monies to local law enforcement agencies for whatever purpose that they choose, but for the first time we have some substantive criteria that the money has to be used for to make sure that it is responding to community needs in regards to how to improve their relationships with law enforcement and other public safety issues. And as mentioned by the chief, one of the usage requirements for the $20 million was to collect data on use of force incidents that result in death or serious bodily injury. Given the context and the fact that we're no longer in an economic recession, it's very important that the legislature make decisions that urges and helps ensure that this money is being used in a way that is sound for California and improves our system of public safety. And specifically on issues that we agree with the Chiefs Association on include purposes such as homelessness, addressing mental health, and at-risk youth. The slight divergence in regards to our viewpoint versus theirs is that we think that this specific item should be a competitive grant process, somewhat more analogous to the strengthening grant for $6 million. For these reasons, we don't have any official position on it, but we do urge that the legislature require substantive policies be included for issuing the grants and help us move towards a competitive process where we can develop programs that are scalable across the state. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Department of Finance.
Phelan Parker, Department of Finance. I don't have much to add. I would just like to say that we recognize that frontline law enforcement plays a critical role in the criminal justice system, and we believe that they can assist in improving outcomes among this population. Thank you.